Today on Life Matters, we're going to talk about something shocking. That's right, we're going to talk about something that's not just shocking, but for you and me, it should be terrifying. It's actually a social disease, and when you hear just how dangerous it is and how widespread, you too are going to want to do something about it. We're going to talk about that on this edition of Life Matters.
This is Life Matters with Brian Johnston. Brian Johnston is the Western Director of the National Right to Life Committee. He has served in many capacities while advocating for innocent lives, as California Commissioner on Aging, as Chairman of the California Pro-Life Council, on the board of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled. He is an author and lecturer, a film producer, and commentator. And now, here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Hey, well, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brian Johnston. And yes, I'm going to talk about something that impacts every society from the beginning. As far as we know, the earliest historians, Plutarch, Herodotus, the earliest historians in Western civilization have talked about this phenomenon, and it's in the news rather regularly. That is the phenomenon of suicide as a social illness. See, suicide is infectious. Suicide in some way can impact the thoughts and attitudes and, yes, the actions of others. And this phenomenon has had incredible implications. Human beings are amazing. Human beings can do extraordinary things. They're wonderful creatures, human beings, but we're also terrifying in our vulnerabilities. So I want to talk about the attitudes that erupt after suicides take place, because you would think people would condemn suicide. Often they don't. And much to their shame, suicides spread. Let me tell you about some recently, a phenomenon, and you've heard about these suicide cults, and you have to think, how could people fall for that? The Jonestown. If you haven't heard about or read about, you could go back and YouTube it if you want. It's kind of sad. But the Jonestown cult moved from California to Guyana, and literally the followers of Jim Jones took their lives together at his request. But he's not the only one. In 1997, there was a cult, a strange cult just outside of San Diego, California. And that particular cult had some very strange theories. They actually were led by a guy by the name of Marshall Applewhite. And if you see his picture, and you can YouTube or wiki this or look it up, the Hale-Bopp comet. Hale-Bopp comet was due to return, and in a sense, they saw this as a prophecy. And they had the wacky idea, Mr. Applewhite had the idea that as it came by the earth, you could get a ride on it. And these people who lived in Rancho Santa Fe, California in 1997, they all decided if they killed themselves, that they would end up on the Hale-Bopp comet. It's incredibly tragic. They also did something else. They recorded their messages before their suicide. Some of them, of course, were followers of Mr. Applewhite. He called himself Doe, and they willingly followed his teachings. There was one taping of a young woman who had just attached herself kind of accidentally to this group. She didn't believe them. She actually thought they were crazy. I'm going to read to you what she said. She made a tape, and this is what she told the camera. Maybe they're crazy for all I know. But I don't have any choice but to go for it, because I've been on this planet for 31 years, and there's nothing here for me. And that woman took her life with that group. So there are social implications to suicide, and even someone, in this case, this young woman, killed herself at the request and really by peer pressure. It's an extraordinary thing, and you can look through history. There have been these types of suicide cults throughout history, but I want to go one level deeper. Again, something that you already know, and that is the phenomenon of copycat suicides. See, copycat suicides are qualitatively different. They do involve the taking of a life by an individual who is willingly doing it, but they often don't know the other people. They may be an acquaintance, perhaps, but often they are not even acquainted. The pattern is that they're from the same social group. They literally see the initiating suicide, that person, and that person is referred to as a suicide. They see that person as similar to them, and that person has now escaped their problems. So you see this, of course, and we hear a lot about it with teen suicides, that one teen commits suicide and then another, and then another. And what they're doing is they're emulating the actions of that individual, and they seem to be without repercussions, and that person has escaped their difficulties. Unfortunately, unless it is properly handled, unless there's a clear message, and this is very important, if we forgive and justify a suicide, it actually encourages suicides. It's very important to condemn suicides. It's very important. I'll give you an example. For example, a lot of teen suicide, often the pattern is that there'll be an assembly at the high school, and they'll gather, and the principal may speak and say, "I have bad news. Tim Smith took his life last night." And gasp goes through the auditorium. But you need to know we all love Tim. And we want you to know that he had things going on we didn't know about. His family was having difficulties, and he had been experimenting with drugs. And we just want you to know that if you have any trouble, and girls are weeping, guys are upset, and we just, in the meantime, want you to talk to myself or the school counselor, Mrs. Smith here. She can answer your questions, but we all love Timmy. Let's just have a moment of silence for Tim. Unbeknownst to the principal, what he's done is he's actually given reasons. He's justified that suicide. The listeners, the kids may think, well, wait a second, I'm not doing very well in school. I'm not sure I'm going to get into UCLA. My folks are fighting. I'm not sure I've dabbled with pot. And they see themselves as like that suicide, that person. And that's what a copycat suicide is, someone who follows suit. When I come back, I'm going to talk about teen suicide, a very powerful and well-known suicide at its time, and how it was effectively handled so that it did not create any copycats. And in fact, thousands of copycats were expected from this particular suicide, but the way it was handled publicly was powerful, and it prevented suicides because suicide was clearly condemned. I'll talk about that when we get back. Thanks.
You're listening to Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Well, you know that Life Matters is about life, culture, and the battle of ideas. And no place is the battle of ideas more evident than in Hollywood, California. I have on with me Bo Bryant. He's the communications director for the Life Fest Film Festival. Hey, Bo.
Hey, Brian. How are you doing?
Great. Hey, tell us about Life Fest, what it is and what happens.
Okay, so Life Fest is the film festival dedicated to showcasing films that affirm the intrinsic worth of human life and the profound significance of each life. So Life Film Fest is based in the heart of the entertainment industry. It's in Hollywood, California, and it takes place every year. So this year, it takes place from May 4th to May 7th, 2017. So that's the first weekend in May. And really what it is, it's about bringing together experienced Hollywood professionals with those just starting out in the industry so that we can really showcase films that affirm life culture, and really engage in the battle of ideas.
Awesome. That is excellent. How can folks get in touch with Life Fest?
We're always looking for volunteers. We're looking for people to sign up, or if you have a film that you'd like to submit and have it shown there, you can find all of our information at lifefilmfest.com. So that's lifefilmfest.com.
That's Life Film Fest, and we hope to hear more from you, Bo, and Life Film Fest. Thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com.
Well, hi. I just wanted to thank you for joining me. You know, I have good friends, children, young adults, and adults that have Down syndrome. And they are so loved. Their parents love them so much because they're the happiest people you'd ever want to know. I really love them. I'm going to tell you something, though, that's rather frightening. The government of France has now prohibited showing positive images of Down syndrome children and letting parents know how lovable they are. That's an actual law in France. Here in the U.S., 80-some-odd% of Down syndrome kids are killed by abortion before they're born. In France, it's 96%. So we're not a whole lot better. If you'd like to help out, you can go to the National Down Syndrome Society, ndss.org, to help out. That's ndss.org. We really are in a battle of ideas, and lives really are at stake.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Hi, well, welcome back to Life Matters. And yes, we're actually talking about a social disease, the infectious nature of suicide. We talked about suicide cults. I told you about a very common situation regarding teen suicides where, in a sense, the folks that remain try to understand and show their love. But if they do it improperly, they can actually show affirmation for the decision. And that's the most dangerous thing to do. It's very important that suicide as an act be strongly condemned. I want to give you an example of that being done. Back in the 1990s, there was a very popular form of rock known as grunge rock. It came out of the Washington, Pacific Northwest area, but it was popular across the nation. And one of the leaders in the grunge rock movement was a guy by the name of Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain killed himself, and this shocked the music world and many people, because grunge rock tends to be kind of dark as well. Many expected many copycat suicides of Kurt Cobain. But something happened, something significant and powerful. I don't know who inspired her, but his wife, Courtney Love, did something quite stunning. At the funeral, she came up to the microphone and very clearly expressed the fact that she had loved Kurt, but she wanted, and she was forceful about this, she wanted every one of his fans to know, quote, "What Kurt did was wrong. It accomplished nothing. It hurt me. It hurt our daughter. And it hurt all of you." And this is when she really got powerful. She turned towards the casket and she said, "I want you to join me as I speak to Kurt and say, I love you, Kurt, but F you, Kurt." Yes, she used the F-bomb. Now, I'm not going to use that on the air here, but it was a powerful term to use, particularly for grunge rockers. She also used a hand signal towards the casket, literally saying, "I love you, Kurt." Again and again, but again and again saying, "But F you, Kurt." She demanded that everyone join her in saying that. The grieving wife sent a powerful message to the assembled fans and to the million others that were watching. It was greatly expected that there would be many, many copycats. Amazingly, there were none. I believe it's clearly the action of Courtney Love that saved lives, because she clearly condemned the act, inescapably condemned the act of taking one's own life. Why is that important? Because throughout history, that's been the only way to stop suicide, that there be social prohibition. That determines if there's many more suicides. So that social condemnation of the act, because as you've already seen, social approval of the act only brings more suicides. I do want to bring this to now the question of assisted suicide. And later in this program, we have an interview with a good friend, a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, Dr. Mark Hoffman, with whom I've worked in California in dealing with the assisted suicide debate. But in dealing with suicide, you have to recognize you're almost entirely dealing with emotions. We have to help people understand that this is a debate not about health. This is a debate not about wishes. This is a debate about emotions. If they're not dealt with, then you cannot win this debate. You can't get through to those people who support suicide and even who support assisted suicide because emotionally they've committed to the idea it's a good thing. So understand, ours is a difficult task. We want to make sure that the laws that prohibit suicide and particularly assisting suicide remain in effect. By the way, the laws regarding suicide don't punish those who attempt a suicide. They don't put them in jail. They're actually there to guide and direct. In California, it's called a 5150, that they're actually restrained because they may become a harm to themselves or others. But it's very much a type of law that's not out to punish, but to protect. Just as truancy laws aren't out to punish children, they're out to protect them from harming themselves and not having a sound foundation. So that's why truancy laws were there, and that's why suicide laws were there, not to punish the victim, but actually to help them and guide them in what is best for them as an individual, and society has that responsibility. So when we come back, we're going to talk to Mark Hoffman. We're going to have another program on copycat suicide and the incredible, powerful influence of society. If we accept assisted suicide, we'll only get more. And that's happened everywhere that assisted suicide has been legalized.
Life Matters continues after this.
Well, you know that Life Matters is about life, culture, and the battle of ideas. In no place is the battle of ideas more evident than in Hollywood, California. I have on with me Bo Bryant. He's the communications director for the Life Fest Film Festival. Hey, Bo.
Hey, Brian. How are you doing?
Great. Hey, tell us about Life Fest, what it is and what happens.
Okay, so Life Fest is the film festival dedicated to showcasing films that affirm the intrinsic worth of human life and the profound significance of each life. So Life Film Fest is based in the heart of the entertainment industry. It's in Hollywood, California, and it takes place every year. So this year, it takes place from May 4th to May 7th, 2017. So that's the first weekend in May. And really what it is, it's about bringing together experienced Hollywood professionals with those just starting out in the industry so that we can really showcase films that affirm life culture, and really engage in the battle of ideas.
Awesome. That is excellent. How can folks get in touch with Life Fest?
We're always looking for volunteers. We're looking for people to sign up, or if you have a film that you'd like to submit and have it shown there, you can find all of our information at lifefilmfest.com. So that's lifefilmfest.com.
That's Life Film Fest, and we hope to hear more from you, Bo, and Life Film Fest. Thanks a lot. Talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com.
Well, hi. I just wanted to thank you for joining me. You know, I have good friends, children, young adults, and adults that have Down syndrome. And they are so loved. Their parents love them so much because they're the happiest people you'd ever want to know. I really love them. I'm going to tell you something, though, that's rather frightening. The government of France has now prohibited showing positive images of Down syndrome children and letting parents know how lovable they are. That's an actual law in France. Here in the U.S., 80-some-odd% of Down syndrome kids are killed by abortion before they're born. In France, it's 96%. So we're not a whole lot better. If you'd like to help out, you can go to the National Down Syndrome Society, ndss.org, to help out. That's ndss.org. We really are in a battle of ideas, and lives really are at stake.
And now, back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston and a very special guest.
Well, welcome back to Life Matters. I'm Brian Johnston, your host, and we have a special guest with us today, a good friend, an advocate for life, and a professional who has confronted this issue of assisted suicide and the emotional implications. Dr. Mark Hoffman has been Director of Psychological and Social Services at the Northern California Center for Rehabilitation. He also, for many years, He was the guy at Folsom Prison that you couldn't get out until you've talked to Dr. Mark Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman, it's a real pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you for having me, Brian.
One of the things that you did a couple of years ago, you were instrumental in helping us in opposing the assisted suicide measure here in California. And you chaired the coalition for the referendum against assisted suicide. And the California Pro-Life Council was proud to be a part of that team, as well as many, many other organizations, because this is an issue that really spreads across our society. It impacts every aspect of our society. So I wanted to find out from you today some of your concerns regarding the psychological state of patients that are tempted with this law. So what do you see as these dangers?
Well, Brian, with the diagnosis of, or actually it's not diagnosis, more properly termed prognosis. When a person is given a prognosis that their disease process is a terminal one, that they are expected to die within a certain frame of time,
mm-hmm.
Depression is almost a universal reaction
mm-hmm.
to that. Most people have some awareness of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's
yes.
research and writings on the matter, that faced with the inevitability of an irreversible condition, of a loss of any sort, a person goes through a grief reaction,
mm-hmm.
which is comprised of essentially 5 stages. The first being denial,
mm-hmm.
a disbelief that what has been experienced has been experienced, as sort of wishing it away immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that typically transitions into anger as the second stage. In this case, with terminal illness, many times people are angry at God, or even angry at themselves for doing things that may have contributed to the situation. This then progresses to a stage of bargaining, where one seeks out different possibilities to make the situation go away, or to rectify the situation so that the loss won't be experienced. We have people, bargaining with God, bargaining with doctors, whatever. The next stage, which is the second to last stage, then, is despair or depression.
Yes.
And probably most often with assisted suicide, we are dealing with people who are in that stage
right.
of grief.
And
they
really,
are, and with that, with depression is a suicidal thinking.
Sure.
Goes hand in hand with depression.
Right. In fact, it's the number one indicator of depression. So literally, if somebody is...
Certainly the most obvious.
Yeah. Now, Kubler-Ross wrote that book for you psychologists, but really for all of us to recognize. I mean, actually, those 5 stages now, they're often used in stand-up routines. It's universally known about these 5 stages, but her point was that people need help through those stages to the final. What is the final one?
Well, the final stage is acceptance or transcendence. Basically coming to terms with the situation. And it's a resolution that enables the person to face the inevitability and to transcend that peacefully.
Yes. What some psychologists call actualization, or really I think the goal as a psychologist, someone who cares for the soul, the goal is a maturity. I think that's really what Kubler-Ross was talking about too, to help people come to an emotional maturity. Facing our death, sadly, is the time a lot of people finally grow up. And she was fascinated by that. And I know as a hospice volunteer, It was an extraordinary experience, and I recommend anyone who has the opportunity to be involved in a positive hospice. That is to say, hospice is not abandoning patients. Hospice, in fact, is intervening and giving them all sorts of attention, particularly human attention, because their need is mostly emotional for many patients. It's a gratifying experience. Dr. Hoffman, you were great as a coalition leader. You were helping Californians to understand this danger. Now, this law has passed, and it's now law in California. It's been challenged in the courts. It was enacted in June of 2015. It was delayed thanks to your efforts and the efforts of many others, but it's now law. And there is a court case that's pending, and I know that the Stop Assisted Suicide Coalition has helped fund that, and many others are too. But right now, I think California citizens, and we're going to be listened to on this program outside of California, many states have legalized this. And you need to be ready for the assisted suicide debate. It's not just on the radio. It's not just a talking head program on Sunday mornings. This is a debate coming to your kitchen table. So there is an organization. How can they find the Stop Assisted Suicide Coalition?
Oh, yes. Yes, well, we have a website, and that is stopassistedsuicide.com. There's no spaces between each of those words. It's just one continuous STOPASSISTEDSUICIDE.com. StopAssistedSuicide.com. People who are interested can sign in on that site, and you can join to become a member. Help with this effort.
Dr. Hoffman.
Yes.
I hope to have you back very, very soon. Our time is running short, but I want to remember, folks, StopAssistedSuicide.com. Dr. Hoffman, thank you so much. I hope to have you back very soon.
You're welcome, Brian. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks.
Learn more about everything in today's show online at lifematters.life, where you'll find all the resources you need to protect life. Subscribe to the Life Matters podcast, where we have even more information on this and all the life issues. Go to lifematters.life to subscribe. Listen to more Life Matters every Saturday at 1 p.m. right here on KCBC.